Hello, my name is Dale Maley. In today's video, we're going to talk about the secret to how to use Behlen's wood grain filler. First question you might have is, why would you use a wood grain filler? Well, it's very difficult to get smooth, mirror-like finishes on open pore woods like red oak and white oak. This material also can act as a filler if you have any small defects you'd like to hide in your wood project. Now, I only use this typically on red oak or white oak tabletops, but some projects I'll utilize it to fill small defects. Now, this is the process I have developed for using Behlen's wood grain filler over probably more than 20 different projects. So let's just run through that process. First step is to progressively sand the wood down to 220 grit. Then stain it with an oil-based stain and let it dry. Then invariably you have to mix up your Behlen grain filler in the can because it separates so quickly. So you mix that up. Then you rub some of it onto the wood with your fingers. If you have small defect or holes, you might want to make sure to rub some of that material into the defect. Then you remove excess with a scraper that's actually sold by Behlen, or you could use a plastic putty knife, and you let that dry. Then you rub off the rest of the excess filler using a piece of burlap bag scrap. Now you're ready to stain it for a second time and then let it dry. Then you can apply polyurethane, the first coat, and let that dry. Then sand it to 220 grit and apply a second round of polyurethane. Let that dry, and then last step, sand to 220 grit for a third time and apply your third round of polyurethane, and your project is completed. As with all products, there are some good points and some bad points. One of the bad points about Behlen's is the grain filler separates out from the liquid in a very short time in storage. What that means is every time you do a project, you're going to have to stir up and get that liquid back in solution with a thick material. The first few times I did this a couple years ago, I tried using a paint stirrer in my drill press, but I ended up with liquid on the floor a couple times, so I found a short piece of wire and just bent it very simply as shown in the picture. I put that into my electric drill. I put the can of Behlen's in my vise to hold it, and so far I've had no accidents using that method. Now, let's look at an example project of using Behlen's wood filler. In this example project, I was making a reproduction of a 1909 white oak lamp. And the shade on top is very difficult to build because of all the angles involved. Well, as you can see on the right, I had two cases there where my joints were not quite perfect, and also at the top there was a small defect in the wood. So I really chose to use the grain filler to fill these defects more than making a super fine finish on the shade. Now, as we discussed before, my first step was I had to go find my old can of Behlen's, as shown on the right. And then I had to also find my little mixer wire, shown on the left under the screwdriver, put that in my electric drill, put the can in the vise and mix it up, and I had no problems. So now I was ready to apply the Behlen's, and I just did that by dipping it out of the can with my fingers and then rubbing it into any of the defects that I had. I did not do the two caps on top of the lampshade. There was no reason to do those. I wanted to focus on the sides where I had problems with the joints. Once I got it applied to all four sides, I used a scraper that's sold by Behlen, or you could just use a plastic putty knife, and I scraped off all the excess material. Once the grain filler had dried, I then used a piece of burlap bag, and I rubbed off the rest of the excessive material. I bought my burlap from a master car company online. Once I did this, then I was ready to stain the lampshade for a second time. So on this lampshade project, after rubbing off the excess grain filler with burlap, Then I was ready to apply, and then restaining it, I was ready to apply my first coat of polyurethane as shown here. The polyurethane is actually still wet in this photograph. As you can see, all the joints, they don't show up anymore. The Behlen does a great job of filling up those little gaps that were in there. It's also good to give a mirror-like finish to that shade when it's dry. So, in summary, this short video explains one method of how to use Behlen's wood grain filler to get a mirror smooth finish and or to hide some small defects. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope the information helps you on your projects, and please subscribe. Thank you.